Alright, here we are. We're going to do a little bit of software coding here. Just a quick tutorial to show you guys how to get the Squareline Studio project set up and move through the rest of the project. I understand the audio quality is probably going to be garbage using my AirPods as a microphone, so bear with me. First thing we got to do is get into our Arduino IDE here. We're going to go over to our library manager, search LVGL. We're going to find this right here. It's asking me to update it. That's because you need to install version 8311, 8311. That's the last version that is supported by Squareline Studio. So if you download a newer version or a later version, importing the project will not work correctly. So go ahead, install that. Once that's done, I will link my GitHub in the description of this video. It's also in the Miata Turbo forum right here, DIY CANgauge GitHub. Come over here, and basically what you want to do is you want to open up this gauge.spj file, go ahead and download it. Open up the gauge.sll file, download that one. You need both of those. So both of those are just going to download into my downloads folder. I'm not completely sure, but I think it's important that you keep them in the same folder. So there they are right there. And then from there, we're going to be able to open Squareline Studio. Make sure you have this downloaded if you don't already. Click Import Project. We're going to click on the gauge. This is the .spj file, as you can see. Gonna open it, and then boom, it pops up right here. You'll be able to see the project settings. You might want to change these if you have a different display resolution or you're using a different version of LVGL, but this is what worked for me. The resolution of my round LCD here is 240 by 240. I have no rotation on it, no offset. The shape of it is a circle. The color depth I actually couldn't find a number for, so I just assumed it was 16 and it seemed to work. We've got the LVGL version in there, and then dark mode and disabled multi-language. So we're going to go ahead and open the project, and here is going to show the two gauge faces. So I can kind of show you around a little bit in here. It's pretty simple. You have your hierarchy of objects over here. So we have that top arc right here, this blue one, the bottom one, the oil temperature one, and then some labels. That's to call out oil temp, coolant temp, and then the actual numbers that we're going to be using to display the temperatures, and then also a button that we will go over a little bit later, probably in a separate video where we do all the functionality stuff, as well as the actual CANbus coding. So yeah, all you have to do basically is start up a screen here. Down here, all you're gonna have to do is I actually can't remember how you open up another screen, but I think it'll come pre-populated with one screen, and then you can add all your stuff to it. So like I said, I added this first arc, and then you come over here to the inspector tab, open up the arc drop down. That's the name of it. You can change it to whatever you'd like. You are going to reference it later in the code. I've got my range here, so at the bottom this is going to be 120. The top of the range, this is going to be 290. Oh, sorry, it's over. It's the bottom one. So this is 120. And all the way up, this is 290. I have the value set to 205 right now. So that's right in the middle, and that corresponds with the label that we have here. This is the start and stop angle, so we're basically saying that we're starting it at 360, ending the arc at 180. Yeah, and then I switched the mode to reverse, because if you had it in normal mode, it would start here, and I can't remember if the color would fill up this way or if it would fill up this way, but we want them both to go from the left side to the right side. And then in style settings, you can do some color changing if you want to. A whole bunch of stuff you can play around here with, shadow, blending. The indicator, which is I think I got rid of completely, or I never added in. It would just be a little line here that swings back and forth with your little bar. And then yeah, that's it for the arcs. The labels, like I told you, these won't change, the actual labels. So I just got oil in that one, coolant in this one. And then we'll actually change these texts here based on the values we're getting off the can alongside the arc. So we'll change this value of the oil temperature at the same time that we change this value, so that the arc here swings with the number. Going over to screen 2, more of the same. You've just got your numbers in here that will change with the can values. So there's boost. Let's see, there's my ethanol one. There's the intake temp one, and then I've got a little bar here that is also lined up with the boost value. So the minimum is -30. For when you're in vacuum, you'll still see a little bit of the bar, and then the max is 30. I probably won't run much past 30 pounds of boost on my 1.8 turbo. So that's kind of what I have those values set to, and then we'll be able to change this value here, which is just set at 0 right in the middle, also along with the boost label using the CANbus values that we pull from the Mega Squirt. Making these lines was pretty easy. I just made text labels here, and this is just a bunch of underscores that I slid up a little bit to be right in the middle of the gauge. And this vertical line is just a bunch of these line characters right above the enter key. And then I think I did one thing in here with what did I change? Did I change it within the font? I don't remember, but I made the spacing closer on these so that there was no little gap in between the lines here, so it was just a straight line. Maybe it was in text. Yeah, there, letter spacing. I sent the line spacing to -2, so it scrunched all those lines up together and made them connect, so you just got a solid line there. Quick look, I guess we can look at these buttons quickly. So this is actually a transparent button. I just used the button widget down here, just like I used the arc widget and the label widgets earlier. And I made it transparent by changing the style settings. In the background, you just change this alpha value to 0. And then I actually set an event to that button. So I scrolled down in the bottom of the inspector tab here, and I added an event, and I named it to screen 1, and the trigger is when the button is pressed. So if you had a touchscreen display, whenever you touched where this transparent button is, which is right in the middle of the display, the action that it would follow is to change to screen 1. So it's basically just a screen switcher. And I have this fade set up right now, this fade mode to move right, so it would kind of slide left and right. I can show you that in the little simulator here. So they're supposed to slide back and forth, but I haven't actually got that working on the gauge itself yet. And then likewise, on the other screen, there is a button to screen 2. It's just called button to screen 2. The name of the event that I added to it is to screen 2. The trigger for it is when pressed, and the action is change to screen 2. The fade mode is move left. So like I said, it slides back and forth, but I haven't actually got that working yet. But yeah, that's the basis of the design here, and now we can get to the actual cool utility. What we're going to do is I've already made a folder on my desktop here just called CAN tutorial. There's nothing in it. So in Squareline, you're going to go export, and you're going to create a template project. This is going to set up all your file paths for you. and we are going to set it to the CAN tutorial folder, select it, and then boom, it exported our template. And then once we do that, we can export the UI files. It's going to go ahead and do that. And then we are pretty much done with Squareline Studio. We can go ahead and open our CAN tutorial here. It's going to create another folder called CANgauge. We're going to open it, and you're going to see your UI and libraries in here. So it should auto-populate your libraries folder with another UI file with your objects in it, that TFT-ESPI library that we downloaded earlier if you were reading through the Miata Turbo forum, and then our LVGL library. And then basically all we have to do from there is open up, it's the LV configuration folder. You're just going to open it in Notepad, scroll down until you find whatever fonts you used. So here, this is the default font for Squareline Studio, Montserrat, whatever that is, and make sure that you have ones populated for every different font size that you use. Sometimes it doesn't always do this. I don't know, one time I had it happen to me where it didn't do this. Other times like this, it does do it for you, but we used 38, so that gets a 1. We used 16, 14, and 12, so those all get 1s, so we are good to go there. And quickly, I'm just going to check this against the file structure that I know already works. So this is my gauge that's already working right now. So yeah, this one has got libraries, UI, libraries, UI, and then in the UI we've got, oops, it's not quite the right one. Actually, I need to go over here. This is where my actual gauge is. So we've got the UI, folder, okay, so I think we need to do a little bit of messing around with these file paths. So this is the one that is working so far. This is what you should base your file path off of. So here's the CANgauge folder. You have a UI and a README in here. We're going to open the UI. This is our actual Arduino file that we're going to open in Arduino. And then we've got a libraries file here. And then in that libraries file we have LVGL, TFT-ESPI, our UI, and then our LV config as well as another README. So let's go ahead and copy these two. I'm just going to copy them, go back into the UI folder, paste them here. Again, I'm not an expert at this. This is just how I managed to get mine working. Skip that one. Okay. So then, boom, that's all working. The other thing we want to check and make sure of is we want to go back into our TFT user setup header file and make sure that our driver is defined. So in this case, our driver is not defined. So we've got this ILI 9341 driver. We're not using that, so we're going to go ahead and comment it out. And then come down here to our GC9A01, take away those two slashes. So we've got our driver defined. And then we will continue to scroll down. There's instructions for this in the initial setup. On the Miata Turbo forum, you'll find it. I think it's the first post, actually. So this is for the ILI934. We'll go ahead and comment all of these out. Perfect. And then we'll come down to our GC9A01. We will uncomment these and then set these pins here to the specific pins that we had set up earlier. So just go on through here. I think it was like 13. I think this was 13. This was maybe 12 or 11, and then it went like 10, 9, 8, 7, I think, something like that. So now that that's good, we'll go ahead, File, Save, close out of that, close out of that one. And then also, remember we copied this libraries folder. Oops. So we can go ahead into, so we're in the UI folder, we were just in this libraries folder, and we updated the user setup header file. So let's go into the further out libraries folder that's just in the CANgauge folder here and make sure that one's set up as well. I'm sure if I took the time to figure this out, I would know if one or the other needs to be set up correctly or if they both do, but like I said, for the time being, this is just what worked for me. So we're going to comment out that driver again, define our driver, and scroll down some, comment out all the pins for the ILI9, and then uncomment all the pins for our GC9A, and set all the pins to the correct number. Go ahead and make sure you file save that. And then once you do all that, that will be identical to the setup that I have going on for my working gauge. So we can open up folder here, go into the UI, and then boom, there's the UI file that we need. We'll go ahead and open it. I already have it open, but I'm just going to open it again. And there you go. So some of the stuff that I have in here is what Squareline Studio made for us. And then some of it is things that I've added. So I actually uploaded this UI file also to the GitHub. I don't know if you can download it and use that file exactly. I think you should take the UI file that Squareline created for you and add these things in. So you're going to want to go through and add all these objects. You want to make sure your includes are up here. Include your LVGL library, include the TFT library, and include your UI header file. You also, whenever you open an Arduino sketch, you want to go into preferences and make sure that your sketchbook location is set. So this UI file right here is just the file that, excuse me, the folder that our UI file sits in. So if you go ahead and browse, my file is in Documents, Arduino, CAN2, the CANgauge file that Squareline made, the UI file that Squareline made, and this is where my UI sits. It's not going to show up in here because we have it open, but this is where it is. I can show you in my File Explorer. CAN2, CANgauge, we're in the UI file. This is where it's sitting at. So we're looking at the same folder in both these screens. So make sure you set your sketchbook location to that. Okay, like I said, you're going to want to add in all these objects, make sure all your includes are up here. I think it already populates this 240 for your screen resolution. It does all your TFT setup, and then I've just got some variable declarations going on, so oil temp, engine temp, boost, ethanol percentage, intake temp, and then we have our dimmer pin set to 6. So we're telling the Teensy that pin 6 is our input pin for the dimmer signal. Our dim state is, we're setting it to 0 to begin. Our backlight pin is 7. brightness is set to 0 to begin, our button pin's 5, and our button state is at 0. And then I also have a Boolean variable, has run, set to false up here. That's just for the startup animation. And then all of this stuff gets created by Squareline. Squareline sets up your void setup function. It gets all of this done in here. And then down here, right at the bottom of the setup, I set up our backlight and button pins. So I have the button pin set to input pull up. So it's telling the teensy that that is an input pin, and the pull up portion is, I guess, making a connection within the teensy to always have that pin at a high state until it's grounded. So it's always going to be high until we ground it out, and then the functionality of that is you just have a button wired to that pin, and then wire that button to a ground so that when you press the pin, it grounds out the pin and changes the state of button pin. Simple enough. The backlight pin works similarly, except it's, you'll see in the wiring when I post that later, it's set up to a relay that actually switches back and forth between high and low state, so it goes from 3 volts to ground based on an illumination signal from the back of the cluster. That's the only thing you have to add in there. And then this is my press button function. So you just declare a function here. Right underneath it, I have button state equal to digital read of our button pin. So our button pin that we declared earlier, we're going to read the digital state of it, which is basically saying, is it high or low, is it 1 or 0, and that pull up is setting it to a 1. So it's always going to be a 1 until we ground it and make it a 0. So right now this button state is equal to 1 or high. So then we're going to open up an if statement and say if that button state is equal to low or it's grounded, we are going to get our active screen. We're going to figure out which screen we're on, 1 or 2. And then if that active screen is the parent of button to screen 2, which that button to screen 2 is on screen 1, so we're saying if our active screen is equal to screen 1, we are going to send this button to pressed. So if we're on screen 1 and we get a low signal from our button, meaning we press the button and ground it out, we're going to press that transparent button on screen 1, and that event is going to trigger and it's going to send us to screen 2. And then we've just got an else here where if our active screen is the parent of button to screen 1, meaning if our active screen is equal to screen 2, we're going to send that UI button to screen 1 button to pressed. So we're going to essentially press that transparent button that's on the screen with a physical button that's wired to our button pin, and send the screen back to screen 1. We have a little delay set up because these loops run really fast, and if you don't press the button fast enough, it might pick up 2 low states, or like 3 or 4 or 5 low states and switch back and forth really quickly. So we just have a little half-second delay in there, 500 milliseconds, to make sure that doesn't happen. And then I can go over the startup animation probably in a separate video. It's a little tricky, but for the time being it works. It's a few loops and setting all our arc values and labels. But here's the main loop. That's just our startup animation. For now, I just have the values for oil temp, engine temp, boost, ethanol percentage, and intake temp all hard-coded in. Once I get the CANbus set up with Megasquirt 3, we're going to be pulling all these numbers from the CAN. And then all it is these basic functions from the LVGL library. We use arc set value. We call out which arc we want to change, arc 1, and we want to set it to the value of oil temp. We do that for arc 2 and the engine temp. We do that for the bar on the second screen with boost, and we want animation on so that it slides smoothly instead of just like flashing up to the next number. And then here we're just setting the text. We're taking the number from oil temp, changing it to a string or text, and then putting it in the place of this label. We do the same for the engine temp, the boost. The only difference here is the boost is a float, so we're having a decimal place with it instead of just an integer, which is a whole value. Ethanol percentage, intake temp, and yeah, that's all the labels. They're getting updated constantly every time the loop runs, which is very quickly. And then here is our dimmer state. So we talked about the screen switching technique already. Here's the dim state technique. So we're digital reading that dimmer pin again. We're looking for a high or low state. In our case, if the dim state is high, so if there's power applied to that pin, which is going to mean there's 12 volts coming out of the illumination circuit on the back of the cluster going into our relay, and then the relay is shooting out 3.3 volts to this dim pin. Our dim state's going to be high, and we're going to lower the brightness to 50. And then at the end there, we are just going to change that back to a low state again. So once it stops getting once it does the brightness shift down, it's gonna set that back to 0 again. And then the next time it comes down through the loop, it's gonna make sure we're still getting that dim state is high. We're still getting power from the back of the cluster into this pin as high, and keep the brightness down. Otherwise, it's gonna give us full brightness. So else, it's gonna give us full brightness of 250. And then down here at the bottom of our main loop, I just call in the button function. So all that does is calling this here means that in this line, it is running all the code that we wrote under the press button on active screen function. So yeah, that's the basics of that. Like I said, you don't have to go through this video, parse everything out, and try to write it all down yourself. In the GitHub here, I have the UI file, just as you guys saw it in there. I will try to keep this updated every time I make changes. But yeah, you can just go ahead and copy the sections out of here and paste them into your UI file. I think that's the safest way to do it. You could try just copying the whole thing and sticking it into the correct file path and loading it to your Teensy, but I'm not sure that that's going to work. Like I said, the safer way is to just go ahead and copy this section, paste it into your code where it belongs, and then yeah, go ahead, copy the button state and that sort of thing into your code where it belongs, and you guys should be up and rolling. And all you're going to do is, I'll show you here, just plug your Teensy in. You can see mine picked it up immediately. So here's my Teensy. Just make sure I'm clicked on that. Go ahead and hit the upload button. You actually don't want to upload this right now, so I'm just going to unplug it. But you can go ahead and hit the upload button. It'll compile your sketch for you. Kind of takes a second sometimes. Oh, I forgot. I was trying to make some changes to the setups here, and I added a couple things. Oh gosh. Well, anyhow, this is going to take me a while to go through, but you should only have a couple errors. Not errors, actually, just warnings. One of them is going to be this touch CS pin is not defined. That's simply because I don't have a touch screen, so I didn't declare a touch pin. That's no problem, just ignore that. You might have errors for unused variables down here as well. You can ignore those. It'll upload to your Teensy just fine. And you will have a working dummy gauge, basically. So yeah, that's the initial setup. Like I said, I've kind of started it here, but I'll go over some of the CAN coding once I get this hooked up to my Megasquirt. If you have any questions, I would probably comment on the Miata Turbo forum. You can leave a comment on this YouTube video, but I probably won't be checking it as frequently as I'll be checking that forum post.